Pour your humble masses yearning to breathe free. And she says, the very final line of Emma Lazarus' great poem, I lift my lamp beside the golden door. That great golden torch, as I mentioned, is a modern torch. She had a big restoration campaign for her 100th anniversary in 1986. I'm old enough to remember, but she was all covered in scaffolding.
They'll be opening up probably about a month or so. A company called Collector Industries, and that's where you can go glamping. You can sleep overnight on Yacht, which used to be a military base, and now it's all a park. In fact, the big hills that we just went by, those are all built on landfill that was built up when they knocked down the old buildings that belonged to the U.S. Coast Guard. Most of Governor's Island is, in fact, landfill. If you look at your map and you see Governor's Island, right into the harbor itself, you see Governor's Island is the shape of an ice cream cone. And the cone part of the ice cream cone is all landfill. That landfill came from building the Lexington Avenue subway. When they dug out that subway, what are they going to do with all the stuff they dug out? They made Governor's Island bigger. And so that's why Castle William that we're coming up on your right, is it tight? It's a low, round building with a little square windows on it made of red stone. Okay, Castle William there is that other fortress I mentioned, and those square windows are gun points. So they point right onto the island. When that was built in 1812, they were pointing at the water, not at the rest of the island. Okay, never actually fired a shot, but it's a historic one that you can visit. You just went past the Scotland area point. So a little bit of rocking, okay, a little bit of water crafts going by, creating waves, which is kind of anything goes on. So there, you can see Castle William had 100 gun ports going around it. And Governor's Island was a military base for centuries, literally for centuries. It was actually named Governor's Island for the British royal governors who lived there for a very, very brief amount of time and then moved off down into Manhattan. Now you can go there to picnic, to stay overnight, to bike, to walk around. It's car free. I used to go there with my kids. It was great to take off on their bicycles. And now you can go there for some spa treatment. If the glamping isn't comfortable enough and you wake up in the morning and you're like, touching my neck, let's go get a massage at the cutesy spa, an Italian day spa. So you see the red brick building with the white sash windows. You see the big modern ones from the 50s and 60s along the river's edge. And then further in, you'll notice one with the hypodermic needle kind of like top. And you see the one with the green top, more of the green top. Okay, 40 Wall Street is the one with the green top. To the right of it is 70 Pine, and to the left is another Art Deco skyscraper. The Art Deco style, very attenuated, very streamlined, very sort of vertical emphasis to these buildings. And so if you look along the water's edge, you see where the ferry is heading. It's following our direction, and you can see there's a building that looks almost like a wedding cake, and an opening between those buildings, just right where that ferry is docking. Again, on the left-hand side of the vessel, we're looking straight down Wall Street. Right, that is Wall Street. Wall Street was an actual wall that went from river to river. We're looking straight down the canyon of Wall Street, and in a moment, you should be able to see a little church tower at the end of the street, which is Trinity Church, in a neo-Gothic style. There we go, Captain Time's always perfect. In fact, slowing down right there, you'll see right down the street. Think of that neo-Gothic, thank you, Captain. Not everything is that. That neo-Gothic style, that's a church actually from 1846. Hamilton Mass, in Hamilton Mass, that's where he's buried. Okay, Alexander Hamilton, buried there at Trinity Church. Behind it, you've got One World Trade rising up in the distance, and in front, where you see the hornblower ship and you see the ferry boat, you'll see a tall masted ship. That is the Waiver Tree, and that's all part of the South Street Seaport. So right behind the Circle Line, you see the tall masted Waiver Tree from 1885. You can visit that vessel. It's absolutely beautiful. And coming up is a Frank Gehry building, the tall silver building with the wavy pattern down the side. That's much more typical of Gehry than the use of the glasses on the IOC building. This is called a group, and that's a residential tower. To the left of the Gehry building with the curvy silver skin on it is the Woolworth building. House built with the architect 1913. That was the tallest building in the world. Nicknamed the Cathedral of Commerce because it is designed in a neo-Gothic style. And it too has a skin on it. It's actually colored in terracotta color. It gives you that lovely green color to it, and then the top is that green copper. The Woolworth building, just like the Art Deco towers I mentioned before, those are being converted into residential towers. Alright? There's a lot of residential building, a lot of residential expansion, what we call the financial district. But speaking of Gothic, got Gothic right here, the Gothic pointed arches of the Brooklyn Bridge. Alright, and again, please feel free to go out front and take photos as you go into the Brooklyn Bridge. It's just magnificent. The Brooklyn Bridge opened in 1883, so it's 3 years older than the Statue of Liberty. It was built between the city of New York and the city of Brooklyn. This was incredibly busy ferry traffic and transportation and ships coming in and out. It could take you half an hour to go from river to from side to side, from the city of Brooklyn to the city of New York. Because when this was built, Brooklyn was its own separate city. The Roebling family were the architects and the engineers. John Roebling started the project. His son Washington took over after John's death. And when Washington was too ill to work on the site, his wife Emily Warren Roebling took over, helping do like an on-site project manager, the main liaison between the architect and engineers and her husband, who is at home bedridden. Emily Roebling was in fact the first person to officially cross the Brooklyn Bridge, but it opened to the public back on May 22nd in 1883. So the Brooklyn Bridge is the first of our 3 East River bridges. Then we'll see the Manhattan coming up right now, and then the Williamsburg Bridge. If you want to remember our East River bridges, just remember BMW, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Williamsburg. So let's look to the Brooklyn side. So there we got the edge of the water in this neighborhood called Dumbo. Alright? Tribeca, Triangle below Canal Street, Soho, south of Houston, Dumbo, district under the Manhattan Bridge overpass. That's a mouthful, right? I love the way they added the overpass. No one wants to live in a neighborhood called Dumbo. But those all used to be warehouses. In fact, those low, dark, red brick buildings, those are all tobacco warehouses, coffee warehouses, sugar warehouses. In fact, we're coming up to a neighborhood with a lot of sugar refineries. So much manufacturing along the East River. And so the bridges actually helped a lot with the commerce and the trade moving back and forth. Now Dumbo is one of the most expensive, one of the most Right, so I'm going to take a break for a moment here. I'll have to answer any questions, and we'll pick it up in just a little bit as we get closer to the Williamsburg Bridge. see all the spiral, almost just like a little NYC ferries and this open area here. It's actually called Wallabout Bay, which is a cool name, but that is the Brooklyn Navy Yard. The Brooklyn Navy Yard still has some cement works in it, still has dry docks, some waves here, still has dry docks, but back in World War II, around 70,000 people were working in the Navy Yard at any given day, making ships and vessels for use during the war. It's been a Navy Yard since the early 1800s, and this is where even today, vessels are repaired and still fixed. A lot of work, actually, the Concord jet that we'll see on Intrepid was patched up and fixed up here at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. But right behind it, you see all new development. This is what we call south of Williamsburg, as you get to the Williamsburg Bridge. And on your left-hand side, you see along the water a raised park going under the Williamsburg Bridge. This raised park was completed roughly 18 months ago and is part of the Deep River the restoration project to help raise that level, raise that whole section there to protect the low-income housing and the housing developments that are behind it. So you see all these little red brick buildings, these block kinds of apartment buildings, everybody's got all the colorful umbrellas. That whole section, you see more as you're making your way north, is all very badly flooded during Superstorm Sandy. So the raise of the East River Esplanade and the East River Park protects those buildings on the other side. To our right, we have a whole new North Williamsburg development, and this is the Domino's Sugar Complex. You see the big Domino's Sugar on top of that building? That is the old Havemeyer and Elder factory that Havemeyer family, they owned, but today it's called Domino's Sugar. It was Havemeyer Sugar, and that was where sugar was refined in that building. When I moved to New York, they still made sugar packets and sugar cubes there. But over the past about 15 years, it's all been transformed into a mixed-use complex with these large apartment towers, small apartment towers, with an opening onto the river. So the residents of Williamsburg, further to the east, still have access and still have views across to Manhattan. The sugar factory itself is from the 1880s, but it's just a shell because you see that glass structure inside, that is all office space. So the exterior has been landmarked, but the interior is completely gutted with frames, and the blue gantries there, these are frames that were used for loading and unloading big bags of raw sugar and then refined sugar to go to be processed at the factory. On the other side, on the Manhattan side, to your left, you can see where they're continuing that East River Park resiliency project. They're raising up the park. There was a park there before, and protecting those East River housing, okay? The housing complexes that we see here, this is public housing, NYCHA, New York City Housing Authority. NYCHA was founded in 1934, 5 years before the U.S. Housing Authority was founded. And this was a desperate need at the time. People were living in much more crowded conditions, low buildings. If you go to the Parliament Museum, you get a good idea of what it was like at the time. And so these are also called sanitary apartments because they're raised up so you get light and air in all of the rooms. Okay, your parks around them, and then you have access to fresh water. You've got kitchens, you've got open spaces. So you create these little towers in the park. And you can see some of these have steel gray boxes on top of the buildings. You look at the little steel gray boxes on top of the building. Those are for power generators. Because when the power plant was coming up on our left, blew up into the Superstorm Sandy flooded it, and it was completely shut down. All of those buildings lost power. And they were all flooded. The water rose and went into those spaces. So people living in the top had no access to their outlets. They couldn't be up or down. So the question is, what is this neighborhood called? Here we're getting into Alphabet City on the Lower East Side. Yeah, because we're getting out into the water. So there's a little bulge on the island that always makes sense. So you can see each little part of when you look at the map. We're coming up to spiders inside of the computer goes. So the bulges are sticking out. The numbered avenues, first avenue, so straight out, and there was a little extra bulge sticking out. So it's avenue A, B, C, and D. We call that the alphabet city. And the grid, actually, I just mentioned those avenues. The street grid starts in 18 wasn't a planet, but 1823 they start laying out the streets. The number of avenues and the number of streets start further out. Lower Manhattan don't have a street grid, so it was developed and settled before the grid was developed. So driving the town and see that Peter Village are these low red brick buildings you see behind the elevated highway there. Five Peter Village were built for the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company as part of the urban renewal slum experiment of these neighborhoods in the 1940s. The Metropolitan Life Insurance Company actually is a building with a little round gold cupola. The one with the great gold round like top is the New York Life Insurance Company. To the left, with a pointed tower and gold cupola, is the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. Those are on 23rd Street, straight down 23rd Street right now. And here's the grid. Anyway, back to the Pier. Edison Town, those were built for World War II veterans in the 1940s. Men coming back from the war needed somewhere to live. And their factories on the other side of the river. So we're close to work with white only. And they were sued to let minorities purchase housing there. They rent apartments there in 1965 after they were finally integrated. The big towers are still on the water. These great towers come right out into the water. After rental finally they go deep into the East River. They go right along the edge of the water. So something you'll notice on the east side is the way it's built out right to the river's edge. Same thing on the Queens side. Right now we're in the borough of Queens. Okay? We're entering into Queens. Another one of our 5 boroughs. I'll walk into the block in just a little bit. To your right is Long Island City, Queens. This is a whole neighborhood that has developed over the past decade. One thing about these neighborhoods on the Brooklyn and Queens side, you saw a lot of these NYC ferries zipping back and forth. The NYC ferry system is almost 10 years old. Okay? The NYC ferry system came about because Long Island City, the whole neighborhood that's coming up on our right, during Bloomberg administration, Mayor Bloomberg really wanted New York City to go. And don't worry about Empire. I'll give her one on one towards the end of it. But the Chrysler Building, right in the center, that graceful spire that's unmistakable. The spire was added to the architect William Van Allen, made sure his building was taller than the one with the green roof, and it's all downtown. The decoration, the detail, is based off Chrysler's automobile. Here we see great second street. It's made of nickel-plated steel, so it's always shiny and it's always bright. Now it's covered up by the new Manhattan. So we're going to Art Deco decorative, graceful, streamlined elements to the modern international style of the UN, with the glass curtain wall and the plain facade of marble and the north and south end. The UN is international territory. It's not part of the United States, not part of New York City or New York State. In fact, it was built by international grouping of architects, Oxford United, to William Harrison, to the Corbusier, and many others. The low strong building with a curved roof with a dome in the center, that's where the Federal Center is. That's the Federal Center. Now, this is the Chrysler Building coming back into the other more modern buildings. Chrysler, not necessarily. Everything is the Empire State Building, but Chrysler is easy to remember because it's smoother and pointier and curvier. And the Empire State Building is more squared up. So, this is at our right. completed in 2012 based on designs by the American architect Louis Kahn from the 1970s. Here to the 1970s. And the trees are linden trees. They get this beautiful pale green color another month or so. The little ruin that we're looking at is a ruin. It's a stabilized ruin of a building from the middle of the 19th century by the architect James Renwick, and that was the old smallpox hospital. Now we're coming to Roosevelt Island, also known as Blackwell's Island and Welfare Island. Roosevelt Island was the island of the undesirable, the sick, the incarcerated, the lunatic asylum, all on Roosevelt Island. And so it wasn't a place you really wanted to go. Nowadays, it's really nice. In the 1960s, there was a development plan to create famous and important reward course. On the left-hand side, brand new developments in Italy. This is northern Manhattan. Okay, so we're getting to the skinny part of the island of Manhattan. Alright, so cool thing. Sometimes you meet people who don't realize Manhattan is fully an island. So we're right up at this skinny part, and we're going to be coming around the bend, okay, and we'll be heading up through what's called the Harlem Ship Canal. That's the Harlem Ship Canal. But this is all new development that we see right here. And the bridge, you can see in the center, the Piers for the swing bridge. This bridge swivels on itself and opens that marine traffic goes through. On your left-hand side, you can see the sign above these looks like little grain silos here. You see NYC Transit, the 207th stop. This is at the 207th Street, and behind these barricades here, this is a storm barricade, are New York City subway cars. This is the subway train yard where they fix the subway lines. This is the very end of the A train. And the A train is the longest of our subway line. So this is another way of protecting against storm surge. Superstorm Sandy pushed water all the way up to here. And you can see that dark line at the base of these little barrel-like structures. That's the tide line. So, you know, you get really hot. You get really, really high. On the other side, you just got tumble down to the rocky edge of the water. On your left-hand side, coming up to a much more humble version of a salt shed. We saw the fancy crystal-like salt shed down in Tribeca. And out here, the Department of Sanitation, there's their regular corrugated metal cast iron, steel shed, very different from that beautiful cast concrete one that we saw down in Tribeca. But now we're making our way around this bend in the Harlem River. Now, centuries University students, and on your left side you're coming up on the only remaining salt marsh on the island of Manhattan. It's called Muskoka Marsh. You see the tide's pretty low, so you've got some seagulls there, you have some gulls there, seabirds there. As the weather gets warmer, we're going to see kingfishers and start seeing seabirds and other icebergs there. But you can see how very muddy it is. But this is a salt marsh. And rising up behind it is the hill of Inwood Hill Park. Now we're going under the Henry Hudson Bridge, and now we're going through the Spuyten Duyvil Bridge. So Spuyten Duyvil, okay, the bridge is right in front of us. There's a swing bridge in action. This is the bridge that's used by Amtrak. So we have to time it so there isn't an Amtrak train going by. So I recommend everyone go out to the bow, out to the front of the vessel or front of the boat, and you can see this. It's really cool. This they have to open for us, okay? But if the Amtrak is going by, we have to wait for them. So I've been on tours, waiting 15 minutes. That's about that. And we'll talk about the Henry Hudson Bridge. This is the bridge going above us right here. And we're connecting northern Manhattan into the Bronx, into the river down the Bronx. But Spuyten Duyvil was really cool to see, and this will bring us into the Hudson River. So I'll be quiet now, enjoy this part of the trip. So we're coming into the Hudson River now. We're going to turn south again, okay? As the wind picks up, it's right around the corner. The wind picks right up. That's beautiful. Oh my gosh, the sunshine is so gorgeous. So on the left-hand side, you'll get